Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, we welcome you for the postgraduate clinic meetings under the auspices of IIP Navi Mumbai and IIP Raigad. At this time, Dr. Mohite sir's team from Sai Hospital Panvel would be presenting a case, and we will have the initial case presentation. Put your questions in the chat box, and at the end of the case, when the clinical impression is over, we can start the discussion. And in between, if it is pertinent, you may interrupt. Sir, do you want to say a few things?
Yeah. Good evening, all. Welcome to this. I think we are having this sixth meeting of the neonatology NICU cases from Navi Mumbai and Raigad, and we are getting really good, encouraging response over the time. More and more people are presenting. This time it's our team from Sai Children's Hospital, Panvel, and today my two colleagues are going to present two really good, interesting cases. I wouldn't say day-to-day kind of, but something unexpected came up in one case, and something was early pickup and good management which could save the baby. So I hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Rahul Patil is going to present the first case, followed by Dr. Vipul Patil, the second case. And then at the end of the case, we can have a good discussion. It's over to Dr. Rahul.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, let's begin. Presenting a preterm, 28 weeks, born at 28 weeks of gestation.
Is he audible? Is he audible clearly?
Yeah, clearly audible. But
Please.
I think there is some disturbance from somebody else. If you can please mute yourself, rest of you, and doctor can continue. Please
Is it
continue.
visible to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll start. Presenting a baby. It was a preterm, born at 28 weeks of gestation. One of the first twins and weighing around 900 grams. He was sent to us for the premature care. There was a history of premature rupture of membranes around 36 hours, but otherwise no other significant antenatal history. We are not going into much details of the case because what we want to discuss is more emphasized in this case. The initial course in the NICU, baby was given the initial antenatal management, emergency management in the form of surfactant via ensure technique, and then rest of the non-invasive respiratory support for a period of 7 days. There was a ductus for which paracetamol was given on day 16 of life. On day 20 of life, child developed abdominal distension, was not tolerating fluids. That was suggestive of hyponatremia and thrombocytopenia. So more of a NEC, for which the NEC support was started. Baby was kept NBM, and for antibiotics and IV fluid infusion, we inserted a PEEK line from Cephalus vein. It was on the right side Cephalus vein, and TPN was started. 4 days later, in rounds, we noticed baby had respiratory distress with feeble pulse, and on auscultation, there were muffled heart sound. Clinically, baby was in hypotensive, there was a tachycardia, and there was desaturation. Immediately, we did a chest X-ray, and a 2D echo was done. This is the X-ray. On X-ray, we can't clearly make out here the tip of the PEEK line. Let's go to the 2D echo. At the time when we see the baby is in distress and in shock, and this is a 2D echo, as you can clearly see, there is a rim of effusion around the heart, and all chambers are getting compressed. So it was like a cardiac tamponade, and child was in obstructive shock. So at this point of time, the diagnosis was made that child had pericardial effusion with cardiac tamponade. Etiology we don't know, but with immediate diagnosis by our 2D echo machine, we could able to make out it is a tamponade. So emergency pericardial tapping was planned. We did all the arrangement, and under all aseptic precautions, we inserted cannula through sub-zipoid process. The fluid is getting tapped. It was yellow colored fluid, non-purulent, non-hemorrhagic.
Rest,
You
please
can see
mute
the-
yourself.
You can see the color of the fluid. It was almost of the color of lipid. It was almost like milkish in color. So the discussion here is what is the cause of pericardial effusion? Why this child, which was absolutely all right the day before, not all right we say, but reasonably hemodynamically stable, and in the morning that was found to him an obstructive shock. So post central venous catheter cardiac tamponade is well documented, almost incidence of around 1.75%. Though the incidence is very rare, it varies from almost 0.5 to 3%. But the mortality, if not picked up and treated, the very high mortality, almost like 81% mortality. The mechanisms involved are like direct trauma at the time of insertion, like perforation, or the catheter tip migration, which itself can cause necrosis and further leakage of the fluid, or mechanical and chemical erosion with chemical inflammation at the site of tip and lead to the exudation of the fluid. Upon insertion, guide wire, introducer or catheter, it can cause detachment of the superior vena cava wall at the junction of right atrium, or can cause direct perforation. Central venous catheter, on repeated contact with the endocardium, it leads to thrombus formation and on adherence to the myocardium, myocardial wall erosion followed by necrosis and perforation up to the pericardial space. So at the time of insertion, direct perforation of the wall can cause effusion into the pericardial space, or over a period of time in the matter of next 2 to 3 days, continuous pressure erosion and then necrosis and perforation into the pericardial space. The perforation more likely to occur if the catheter tip is located in the heart in contact with the wall, because cutting edge moves in corresponds with the respiratory movements and cardiac contractility. So every time when the patient breathes or cardiac contractility, or if the baby having movement of the limb where the catheter is inserted, there is a to and fro movement of the catheter tip, and that can lead to the further progression of tip into the pericardial space via the endocardium and myocardium, or at the junction of SVC and the right atrium through the sheath, it progresses into the pericardial space. The angle formed by the catheter tip and the vessel wall or the heart wall is a major risk factor. Almost, if it is not in line with the wall and it has an angulation, then more than 40% chances that it will perforate and can cause a pericardial effusion. Chemical erosion, as we give more of a hyperosmolar fluid, it can cause chemical inflammation and further lead to the exudation of the fluid. So prevention, the selection of the catheter, selection of the more flexible and short catheters. Routinely we use our Primicath, which is around 28 gauge and a length of around 30 centimeter, through which, like, we should know how much fluid we are giving. Up to 30 ml per hour is allowed through the Primicath. Then second, it could be relatively bigger child, we can use our PICC line, which is around 24 gauge and around 15 to 20 centimeter. We should have proper measurement of the length, how much catheter we are going to insert, like from the upper limb site of insertion to the second right intercostal space, and for the lower limb it is just above the level of umbilicus, like it should lie below the level of diaphragm. And the conventional method, like we use X-ray post procedure to confirm the tip, but there are certain fallacies like rotation, then at times because of movement like respiratory movement, cardiac contractility, or the movement of the limb, the tip position can vary. So in that case, we better, now it's an era we shifting towards ultrasonography for marking the position of the catheter of the tip. So use of ultrasound to guide proper insertion, like selection of proper vein with the help of USG to avoid arterial insertion, and then tip of the catheter marking on the ultrasonography. So that's all from the case. So here, just to make an awareness, like PICC line or Primicath is very common practice for infusion of the medicine, antibiotic or vasoactive medicines. Once we do it, though, the complication like cardiac tamponade, here what we seen in our case is very rare, like incidence is less than 3%, but the mortality, if not picked up early, the mortalities can go up to 75 to 80%. That's all from the case.
The case is open for discussion.
Okay.
Sir,
Nice.
any chance of thoracic duct injury by catheterization?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, what you said?
Any chance of thoracic duct injury by any catheterization like upper or lower vena cava insertion?
Thoracic duct injury is not possible. The commonest cause of thoracic duct injury is basically post-cardiac surgery. That's the commonest cause. This is not a surgery. We are as good as non-invasive, going through either the great veins in the cubital fossa or from the inguinal area or from the saphenous veins. So no chance of thoracic duct injury, or very unlikely that you will be migrating into thoracic duct.
So the fluid was not chylous then.
Fluid was?
It
The
was
fluid
chylous
which
fluid.
Fluid which we withdraw from that was a TPN fluid. Was a TPN which was giving through the central line. Since this baby developed NEC, necrotizing enterocolitis, he was to be put on central line catheter, and that's why it was inserted. And that catheter perhaps got migrated into the pericardial space, transcardiac or transgreat veins.
Okay, sir. I think in that video, the fluid you aspirated looked like lipids, or it was milky. That's why you must have thought that it was chylous. Maybe that could be the reason, but it could be just the lipid also, because I think that's why they are asked. Somebody has asked in the chat box also.
You're right.
Yeah.
It was a lipid which was given through TPN.
Yes. So that
There are
one,
certain-
it looks completely milky. That could be the reason that somebody has asked that question.
You're right.
Certain red flag signs while inserting the peak line and post insertion, like initially once we measure the length properly, the catheter should not be inserted beyond that measured length, even if it is going smoothly. Second thing, if the length is very less what we measured, in that case we should confirm the position of the tip of the catheter. In that case, selection of the catheter, like Primicath, there are two varieties available. One is stilette, with stilette, and one is without. With stilette, the tip we can easily mark. That is a good thing we can see on the X-ray. So use of a stiletted catheter. Second thing, the position marking on the X-ray. Like if the tip of the catheter is at the level of the hip or shoulder joint, that is not a good sign, because these are the site where more of a tributaries are there. So in that case, the catheter tip may migrate into the tributaries, and that is more likely to cause thrombosis and erosion or extravasation. So in that case, we'll have to withdraw the catheter and make sure it is at least in the larger vein, not into the IVC. Second thing, the ideal position of the tip of the catheter, if the X-ray is properly taken in the midline, if it's from the upper limb, like distal portion of the SVC, but away from the cardiac ciliary. So it is in the larger vein, but not into the heart. And periodic checking of the X-ray of that position, because movement of the flexion, like flexion movement of the limb, can cause to and fro movement, and further every movement can displace the tip of the catheter at least 2 to 3 intercostal space. That is what is documented from the study. So periodic checkup of tip of the catheter with X-ray, like on X-ray midline above the level of T4, fourth thoracic vertebra, and away from the cardiac ciliary, and in the from catheter inserted from the lower limb, it should be below the level of 9th thoracic vertebra, but right side of the spinal vertebra, right on right side of the vertebrae. So that confirms if catheter is in the IVC and not into the heart. Second, another important, if we use a left limb for the catheter insertion, in that case, it should not be at the level of hip joint. In that case, it may be into the tributaries, or at times rare complication, it may migrate into the lumbar vein. It goes posteriorly. Lateral X-ray can confirm that, but that is a very rare but devastating complication, because it can cause permanent spinal canal injury. From lumbar vein, it can migrate into the spinal canal, and it can cause neurological injury. So it should not be at the level of hip joint. Second thing, it should be completely traversing the midline, and the catheter tip has to be on the right side. So that will confirm that it has gone into the IVC. Then while insertion, it should be a smooth. Like if we're getting resistance, we are not supposed to force it, at times the common tendency is to use a 10 cc syringe and flush it rapidly. But if we use a force, in that case, the tip can uh, traverse through the wall and it can cause thrombosis and further injury to the vessel wall. So that's not a good idea. So it should be a smooth progress without any resistance. Another important thing, at times after 2 to 3 days, in case if the syringe pump is showing occlusion, another tendency to use more force. The infusion pump force should not be more than 300 mmHg. That is what is recommended. It should be lesser. The rate of infusion through Primicath should not be more than 30 ml per hour. Ideally, 10 to 12 ml per hour is more than enough for most of the premature babies less than 1 to 1.2 kg. So these are certain red flag signs. Again, in case the length is less and we want to advance, that is not a good sign. So we can withdraw the catheter, but we cannot advance it further in the second setting. So these are the things we should see.
Yeah,
in,
thanks, Dr. Rahul. Somebody has put a comment that thoracic duct obstruction due to PICC line is reported. Yes, it is true, because in superior vena cava, you may get thoracic duct drainage, and that could happen, but that is relatively rare. So mainly what I
Poonam?
think, yeah. So
Hello, Poonam.
okay, so that can happen, but it is rare. I think here Dr. Rahul is trying to say about the position, intracardiac migration and positioning. Just one question I would like to have. Do you have any X-ray of after insertion, just to see whether the tip was, where was the tip? We got the echo, I think, after tamponade, but before that, do we have anything? So can you pinpoint us where is the tip on this one, or this is like a birth X-ray?
We do not see the tip, but you can see the thin line traversing through
Okay.
the hand, right?
Yeah.
Here we cannot locate the tip, but we can see the cardiomegaly. We have confirmed the pericardial effusion by echo. So reasonable evidence corroborating. We basically did not go with the clear understanding that it's a perfused fluid, because this was a NEC child very likely having underlying infection, not whether it's a pus. But his was clear-cut tamponade. And when we tapped it, it was clearly TPN that we could get, the lipid which you could get. And post-tap, we have not given the echo. The whole thing was immediately cleared off, and child, most importantly, showed dramatic clinical recovery.
Yes.
Okay,
great.
so we pulled out that catheter immediately, and he stabilized. This child was discharged, I suppose, after around 8 or 10 days. He's absolutely well-grown child. This case we have seen about 3 years ago. The baby is doing absolutely perfectly okay.
So the reason sorry, I was asking is because see, even if the X-ray, if we go in and you come out and then you get a nice position, that one entrance into the myocard, the heart, that itself could trigger, it with the PICC line or umbilical line, even just going inside and then withdrawal, because many times we put the line, they are inside the heart, and you withdraw and they are in the most ideal position. But there are cases which they have shown that the position has been absolutely normal, but still there has been tamponade. So apart from this migration history and all, if you just go inside once also, like this happens more with umbilical line, you can still cause that endothelial injury inside the heart.
Yeah, a nidus of injury, you may call it. Just
Yes.
induced a nidus, which will just keep.
Dr. Jitendra wants to say something, please.
Mohit sir, your friend Dr. Chintan Singh is in the panel, so he is an expert in functional echoes and sonology in neonate.
Jitu, because of the mask, we can't get the clarity to your voice. If you could remove that during speak, I think that will be better. Please start.
Can you hear me, sir? Sir, we have your friend Dr. Chintan Singh around, so we can take pearls from him also. Dr.
He's
Chintan,
there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please. Great. Go, good
Yes,
to see
Dr. Chintan, please have your inputs, questions about.
Please stop the share screen.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Hello, sir. Chintan here.
Hi,
Sir,
long time. Great.
Sir, I must congratulate because it's such a high mortality situation, and that you could save the baby. It's amazing. I've seen at least 2 of these, Now, looking at the way the echo was, the tamponade was quite severe, which means the baby really would have had few more minutes to go before he would have collapsed. So it
Pulseless.
was really an amazing pickup. Obviously, sir, I think what we do here in UK is because the Permicath that we use is not really a radiopaque thing. If you use Neutroline, it will be radiopaque. So we usually use gastrographin and we do a contrast X-ray to confirm the tip of the line soon after insertion. Another point to notice would be that if we have really reached a point where it is such a severe tamponade, I think prior to that, 4 to 6 hours prior, we might have started to pick up something like tachycardia or slowly, a little bit of baby becoming unstable. So that's something I think for all of us and staff to remember, that if we start to see drifting parameters, basic heart and respiratory parameters, then we need to keep a very close eye if there is a line. It could have been sepsis 6 hours prior if the baby was tachycardic, eventually evolving into a tamponade situation. But no, amazed to see how you could tap it and sort of make the baby stable again.
Just responding to your comment, perfectly right, that you should have picked up the early tachycardia. Unfortunately, this child was with a NEC with probable underlying sepsis with systemic inflammatory response already on. So the heart rate loses its specificity. So this child is already at 1 period. This is 900 grammer. So I mean, the whole thing becomes so complex that and you can't be 24 hours, 25/7 bedtime and bedside.
Yeah.
I mean, you have worked with us, Chintan. So you know the kind of situation we have here.
Yes, yes.
So,
Right.
And it shows the importance of bedside, point of care ultrasound, and which is so good to have, that you could pick up things very early, and having that handy ultrasound made it so easy for you to quickly get on and tap the tamponade. That was spectacular.
Excellent.
Great.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Great to have your comment, Chintan. Nice to see you long time. Great.
Thanks to me, sir.
Dr. Chintan. Dr. Rahul, just one more question. Which catheter you used? Did you use the one with the guide wire or without guide wire? And if I'm asking that question, is it relevant in this case?
Yes, sir. We use the catheter without guide wire.
Okay.
Without guide wire.
And
The
is it
one with
relevant?
guide wire, the problem with guide wire is that it can advance and it can cause the immediate complication of perforation. May not perforation at times, the guide wire, if there is resistance and if you force, it can cause luminal injury, and later point of time it can create any thrombosis. So these are the two things guide wire can create a problem in all these babies. So we prefer to use without guide wire.
Yes, that's what I expected. I know guide wires make things very easy, and if you see, they are really like a hair thin guide wires, and you cannot just put them back in like the bigger catheters. But here the case is not for endothelial injury. Here is the case of direct perforation of the vein, which can happen during its path anywhere. And here is the case. Many times you would see when you have started like a maintenance fluid or something, and there would be a leakage. Usually you see these babies photos colleagues put in with the leg swollen with the PICC line. So these are the ones which happen while inserting, a lot of pressure being put up. So, but irrespective, again, that may say with guide wire or guide wire, without guide wire, the endothelial injury is going to happen because of the nature, the way it has been made.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And did we do any head sonography or anything in this baby after the incidents? Sonography of the brain of this baby?
That we do
Ultrasound.
periodically for all our babies on day 3, day 7, and while being discharged. And this baby is neurologically intact.
Yeah, so that's what, because see, always you can see saturation of 64, even though it is a brief thing, especially for extreme preterms, they are at risk of hypoxic injury even when they are 17 days. So I'm sharing this because during early pandemic, we had a baby with pericardial effusion, 780 grammer with post umbilical line, and we ended up doing the same thing. baby did well, but this baby ended having intraventricular hemorrhage also, which wasn't there. So if the hypoxia is prolonged, so that's the importance of tapping it quickly and having the perfusion back, because if the hypoxia is prolonged or there is a hypotension which is prolonged in extreme preterm babies, you can have like a periventricular leukomalacia and other complication associated with hypoxia in this case. Now, very well managed and good to know that 3-year follow-up, 2-year follow-up is also it is there. So the question asked by Dr. is how you manage nutrition after removal of PIC and NEC.
I'm sorry.
How did you manage nutrition of this small baby after removal of PIC line and management design?
After 24 hours, we put it, insert it through different site.
Yes, so 900 may be difficult to manage with peripheral IV and NEC. So you must have. So obviously, with the we have to accept the risk and we have to do it again. This time, a little bit more careful and be more alert.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Just one comment.
Yes, please.
Sir, I'm Snehal.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Sir, I have seen babies with genetic etiologies with pericardial effusion and NEC. Of course, this baby we have been following up. But few babies had mutations correlating to mevalonic acidemia, which may be mild, which may do later better. But in those babies, they have used octreotide and interleukin therapies. Some of them you have managed this baby very well and came out, but some of them they die, or some of them they have frequent history of hydrops in previous pregnancies. Just to add, I don't know, this case is mechanical pericardial effusion, but correlation of pericardial effusion and necrotizing enterocolitis, I have seen few cases where we could find out the etiologies.
Yeah, really answer to your question. The octreotide related ones are the ones with more of a lymph related.
More of chylus, yes sir, more of chylus.
Yeah, like chylopericardium.
Yes, yes,
so
sir. Yes, sir.
Chylopericardium. This is traumatic pericardium. This is
Yes,
more into
yes, sir.
bleeding. So the
Yes, sir.
chylopericardium, you get basically chyle anywhere, chylothorax, chylopericardium, ascites. You ultimately end up giving either octreotide or something
Yes,
to
sir.
reduce the secretions, and we give even a MCT oil feeds, MCT based feeds, which will be bypassing the lymphatic channels.
Yes,
So
sir.
those are different things. The chyle related management is totally different.
Yeah.
This is just we had to remove that tamponade, and that
Yes, sir.
showed you clearly showing the abating of the free wall of the right atrium, which is the clear classical case of tamponade.
Yeah,
You
this
just
was
have to
sudden, maybe. Yeah.
becomes all right. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
yes,
will,
sir.
I agree with you what you said, but that's more of a thoracic duct related
Yes, sir.
pathology rather than a plain pericardial pathology.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to add a quick one, that if you really see antenatal fluid in the lungs and pericardium, then consider Noonan's and Turner syndrome as your much more common genetic differentials than others.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, comment well taken. Dr. Chintan, one question for you from my side. Are you still giving gastrographine through PIC lines right now also? And would you do it for the lower limb lines also in UK? Because I think that practice was kind of stopped after we got better quality X-ray. I know the 28 gauge is very like a very thin, but those soft films and all we ended up doing, because I think there was some cases where extravasation of all these things into the peritoneum, and gastrographine is a peritoneal irritant if in case the line is out, and you may inadvertently have some issues with preposition to NEC and all. So are they doing routinely the gastrographine?
Yes, sir. Yes, routinely. But because we know the volume of the line, so really we don't land up pushing that into the baby. We do it. We actually only start with something which is 1.5 times the volume of the line, so that we don't inadvertently land up pushing too much, and it's got its own toxicity as well. So we don't do that, number one, and we do it only for permicath, which are really the tiny ones which can't be seen on X-ray very clearly. And usually in the thorax, once it reaches, you could trace it nicely in the shoulders, but the minute it reaches near the heart, the clarity is lost.
Yeah.
If we use the Nutri-Line, which is actually radio opaque, it is much more clear, and we don't need to put contrast for that. But for Permicath, we still use it as a routine.
Great. Good to-
Chintan, just one question. I mean, can you after the procedure, can't you just track it with your USG itself or echo itself with the position? I mean, do you really need to see the contrast? I just want to know. I mean, that's what we do is basically we just check it with the echo machine where the tip is, and I want it to be about a centimeter below the cardiac entry point. Am I okay with that? Or what is your
Absolutely
take on
okay, sir. Absolutely okay. And in fact, the archive's recent article for the umbilical lines it is, but any line which is in IVC, it is quite easy to identify the tip of the line when it comes to.
Absolutely.
If it is in the
Absolutely.
superior vena cava, because I'm echo accredited, so I do a lot of echoes. If it is in superior vena cava, sometimes tricky if it is slightly higher up. But if it has reached IV SVC RA junction, you will be able to definitely see that it is at a wrong place. I think positioning of right place in superior vena cava with an echo will be tricky, but wrong place inside heart will be definitely easy to pick. IVC can be easily picked up.
Okay.
All right, good. I think we had nice discussion. If there are no further questions, sir, do we have second case also?
Yeah. We'll come with this.
Okay, good, nice.
It was a good case discussion, sir. Just one comment I will say, like anything that goes in the body is generally radio opaque. So Dr. Om Prakash here, sorry, I am on logged in with Sheetal, so I am there with her. So Permicath will be also radio opaque. Yes, there are difficulties. So what we do practically, if you adjust the contrast on the screen, on the X-ray screen, what we have got X-ray equipment at present. If you adjust the contrast.
Okay, I think we have lost.
Also be. Am I
Yes.
audible?
Yes. I think you are breaking because you are traveling, Dr. Om Prakash.
Yeah. That's right. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
points well taken. Yes, that's why I asked Dr. Chintan. I know you have to have really good X-ray exposure technician and good machine. But in spite of that, as correctly pointed out, if it is coming to a certain point against the bony prominences where you can't exactly tell where is that junction of SVC into the atria, for those cases, of course, and only certain lines as pointed out by Dr. Chintan. But I think first it's up to the unit protocol to decide whether you want to have it or not. But echo and ultrasound gives you a really good advantage to have the real-time positioning.
Second thing is, you need to be very careful when you are bringing out this Permicath, because there is very high chances that you may, part of it may break down and then you are keeping half inside and half outside. So you need to be very careful.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
What you said is absolutely right. We had an experience of one of our resident cutting it, and that got just sucked inside and stuck into the right atrium, and it was to be removed by the intervention radiologist subsequently. So it's a very tricky thing. It's not very simple technique. So
Always one such
yeah,
case, sir, and always they will remember lifetime this kind of case.
yeah, absolutely.
Please let us move to the next one. Thanks.
We'll move to the next case. Next case is to be presented by Dr. Vipul Patil, our other consultant. And so over to Vipul. Yeah. Full screen.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So this is the second case where we had a 16-day-old baby with a rectal bleeding. So this 16-day-old male neonate came to us with history of rectal bleeding since one day, means since morning. Baby came to us in evening. They noticed there were 3 episodes which were moderate quantity, fresh blood, red in color. There was no mucus in stool, which mixed with blood. It was a clear fresh blood only. There was no history of vomiting, abdominal distension, fever, no history of jaundice also. So we took a detailed history. This baby was born to a primary mother, 22 years old, spontaneous pregnancy. Mother was on a regular antenatal follow-up. Antenatal scans were done, which were normal. No history of any other maternal drug use. So no history of any taking of anticonvulsants, anticoagulants, AKT. There was no family history of any full allergy or bleeding disorders. Perinatal history, the labor pain started at 38 weeks. No history of any complications during delivery, no bleeding, no placental abruption or previa. It was a full-term normal vaginal delivery. Baby was cried immediately after birth. Birth weight was 2.7 kg. No NICU stay. Baby was with mother only. Started on breastfeeding immediately, and vitamin K injection was given at birth. Postnatally, baby was on exclusive breast milk. No outside milk was given. Mother was consuming cow milk after delivery. So what is the thought process? So it's a 16-day-old male neonate presented with a fresh blood per rectum.
We just wanted to make this interactive
Yeah.
because something we got something unusual. But let's. I thought we should discuss with this as a scenario.
So
How
one
is the
question.
baby? Is the baby active, alert?
Not sick. Active alert, not sick.
Yeah, it's a not sick baby.
Non-sick.
Active alert.
Okay, somebody has asked sick or non-sick. So not very sick baby.
Why you ask that,
Non-sick
Shantala?
patient,
So
we should think
usually,
of more of a non-infective cause then.
Baby is
Yeah,
stable,
so if-
you know, baby is stable. So we should look for whether there is any local pathology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's one thing.
And
we want to make
And-
some more comments on that.
Yes.
that cow milk protein allergy also.
Yeah. Cow milk protein allergy, I will say generally it doesn't cause like a fresh blood. You have put it as a, a hint, or I don't know, to confuse people. But generally I've not seen cow milk protein causing a frank blood, because there are different presentations are there.
Now, there can
I
be
have objection. We have seen cow milk protein with frank blood.
frank blood
So,
also.
Maybe.
Yes,
Obviously,
yes,
yes,
your experience is
intestinal
more,
bleed.
but up till now I have not seen kind of.
Yeah, lower intestinal bleeds, Om Prakash, can present like that, and cow's milk protein, it has been reported to have.
Right.
It's usually a well child thriving well and has intermittent bleeding in the per rectum.
Yeah, I agree. But Om Prakash, I have seen really a frank blood. Even I never
Yeah,
thought before.
I
that-
agree, sir. I'm just saying my experience sharing kind of. Yes.
Yeah.
So somebody has said whether it could be polyp, hemangioma. I think we are not going to diagnosis here. We are still in the process of thinking what could be the reason. Isn't it, Dr. Vipul? That's what you want to put it forward?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
just wanted to. I think they gave us a good first kind of a differentiation: sick baby or non-sick baby.
Non-sick.
So that really puts you to two different tracks. If there is not sick, then you have reasonably ruled out those specific category of sick ones, the sepsis and the DIC and all those things. So go ahead, people.
Yeah. So on clinical examination, so on clinical examination, baby was a bit lethargic, hemodynamically stable, no pallor or icterus. Per abdomen, it was soft, no distension, no organomegaly, good peristalsis. Rest of the symptoms normal, local examination normal.
So no contribution by the clinical examination.
Yes.
Non-sick baby, PR bleed, severe, large quantity, 3 times. That was sent to us for that on day 16. Otherwise, normal child. So how will you proceed in this child? That's what we go. You can go ahead and suppose.
Yes.
Anybody
So-
wants to make any comment at this point of time?
So we had some few differential diagnoses at this point of time.
Mickles can cause Mickles.
Okay, Meckles.
Yes,
can
but
cause-
it's too early. I mean,
It's too
neonatal we are not seen. We have seen Meckles, whatever is beyond 3 months, commonly 1 to 2 years, or even later. At neonate, Suresh or Om Prakash or anybody else, you've seen Meckles coming soon.
No, not. But I'm just thinking, the
Agreed.
possibilities.
So usually factor deficiencies can cause fresh blood, and as some rare factor deficiencies, and these local arteriovenous or any malformations.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I totally agree.
So our
Umbilical
first
site-
differential was
The
Sorry.
umbilical
Hello.
site, Om Prakash is asking how
Umbilical
is the
site
umbilical
bleeding
site?
or oozing, anything like that?
No,
nothing.
Not there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Yes, Om Prakash, you are saying
Yes, sir.
something.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
so we had some few differentials. First was obviously hemorrhagic disease of newborn.
Late
Which are
SDN.
classical, usually classical
Yes.
presents with the, yeah,
Classical won't be coming like this actually. Okay,
Early
this
or,
will be
yeah.
more of classical.
early or classical.
Yeah.
Second, any inherited bleeding disorder, any factor deficiencies. And third one was some like any other acquired causes. So we investigated accordingly, and these are the investigations. So there was no evidence of any thrombocytopenia. The coagulation profile, PT, APTT was normal, INR okay. Rarely factor 13 deficiency, factor 13 activity was also okay. Liver functions are normal. So what is the next?
So how will you proceed from this? Any more suggestions at this point?
Someone
Any
says
other-
local
Any
cause.
malformation locally,
Sorry, Chantala?
AV
Any local
malformation.
cause?
Any local cause?
Local
What do I
cause,
do?
what-
Scopy
What?
Yeah, Scopy.
2.6 kg. Which Scopy you want? Upper or lower? I mean, it becomes very difficult.
It has to
I
be
don't know whether-
lower, sir, because it is fresh blood.
Sorry, Chantala. Chandra, it was a massive bleed 3 times, and then the baby was there with us for next 2 days, and there was no bleed at all after that.
Yeah. So I'm coming to the course.
Yeah.
This baby was admitted in NICU. Feeding was continued with baby tolerated well. As the baby was lethargic, that's why we did electrolytes. So sodium was 127. So which was corrected. Baby's activity also improved. Surprisingly, after admission, there was only a single episode of bleeding, which we observed on the same day, after which almost 36 hours, there was no bleeding.
So, Dr. Vipul, I think somebody has somebody has mentioned polyps, hemangioma, and all they were considering in the chat box. Just to complete the list, somebody has asked for barium. So I think that is a good thing to answer. Like, did we consider barium? Not consider? If yes, why? If not, maybe the person who's asking can tell why they are talking about barium.
Yeah. What was his thinking of with
Yes.
barium? What
Because
was he
I
thinking
can
of?
think of something, but let the person, either you can
Yes.
put it in a chat box or tell us.
Yes.
What is that? Like we can diagnose on barium. Filling defect. Okay. All right.
But
Or
what enema? Barium enema or barium follow through or what exactly?
so I think Dr. Vipul, I think they are not commenting. Factor 8 we have already spoken. It is not that. I think that person could be saying whether there was any volvulus, because in volvulus you can get just a twist, bleeding, and then everything can just go normal. But that you can't diagnose unless you have got a contrast study, upper GI, or ultrasound that will show something. But if there is anything else, you can take it here, Dr. Vipul.
Yes,
He is right.
He is right. So baby had one episode of vomiting after 36 hours of admission. And so we did a sonography, and sonography was showing this. So here we can clearly see the SMA, which is twisting around SMV. Okay. So it was a case of midgut volvulus.
Reason for presentation, this is not a very common presentation of volvulus. Only Malina, and that's a frank blood. It's not very common. Though theoretically, yes, when we search the literature, there were a few cases reported like that. But otherwise, this is not at all a common presentation when it comes to frank Malina. This baby did not have a significant, just one vomiting, which could be normal with any baby.
And just before discharging, we thought we'll do the USG, and to our surprise, this came out. Had we sent this baby without USG, perhaps another significant bout or maybe a gangrenous bowel could have really made a disaster. So we wanted to give some take home that this kind of presentations, perhaps we have to complete the investigation till the time we get some definitive cause, especially if it's a frank bleed. Just wanted a comment from all the experts. How many of us have really seen a frank melena as a presentation of volvulus? Is it really a common one? To us, this was the first case presenting as melena, our center. That's the reason we presented.
Somebody is seen in bigger kids. So, Mohite sir, we have, like at Western Australia, we looked at a retrospective analysis of contrast studies done for suspected volvulus or malrotation. And in that, green vomiting, bilious vomiting is the classical sign. But when I was looking for it, the incidence of green vomiting is just like 30 to 40%, and it is not so common. But I haven't seen amongst those whatever 150 odd contrast we did. But while preparing for that manuscript, when I read, it is the lower GI bleed as well as occasional upper GI bleed can present. But personally, I haven't seen it, and yes, I would think about it because I have seen and read those cases. But if you have just one bleeding, it would be really, one has to be really, into it and knowing this, then only one can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And sonography is so easily available, and our sonologists are very good at picking it. I think it's worthwhile doing that. Even if one you pick out of 100, I think it's worthwhile doing it. It's not definitely worth missing it. The child goes back and comes with some gangrene bowel, and you literally lose him. So just kind of a take home. This kind of odd presentations, perhaps it's worthwhile going ahead and do those basic investigations. So that's the reason.
But so isn't this intermittent? So we could have easily missed this if it hadn't happened at that time during the ultrasound.
Sorry, Chantala?
Can you have missed the volvulus if it could have reverted back if it hadn't happened during the ultrasound? So what I'm trying to say is
no. That relation of the artery vein will persist unless and until you correct it surgically. The bowel can twist and untwist.
Between the artery.
Yeah. Okay. Even in the asymptomatic period, you do the USG, still the pathology will persist on the vascular relation. That has to be corrected.
Okay. My other question is, probably this child had significant vomiting that wasn't probably picked up by the mother, but the melena was much more significant.
No, ma'am. There was no history of vomiting. And actually only one episode of vomiting occurred. We already almost planned discharge of this baby. And in the morning, the baby had one episode of vomiting, which was also non-bilious. But just to complete the list of investigations, and as the baby had a single episode of vomiting, we did this USG. Otherwise, the baby was planned discharge that morning.
And Chandala, this baby was hospitalized with us for 3 days, and that time he didn't have vomiting. So even if mother misses, suppose, I hope my team won't miss at least multiple recurrent vomiting. So I don't think we have overlooked the vomiting. We saw the first one and we subjected him to that sonography. I mean, it was just a sixth sense of the consultant on duty at that time. That's all.
So, yes, Dr. Chantala, I think in that case, see, it's usually malrotation that leads to volvulus, and volvulus could be intermittent. Malrotation will be there, but it may not present always unless it is like a fixed malrotation. And we may not get bilious vomiting, we get normal vomiting. So as we say, that we have to do it at that time, and lucky that you got it. But sir, many times with ultrasound, if there is abdominal distension, there is no good clarity. So most of the centers would go for ultrasound of the abdomen because it is bedside possible. But many conventional centers still go for upper GI contrast study, or what we call barium. Nowadays, nobody uses barium. We are just used to that terminology. we already know gastrographin or enterographin, because these are low contrast mediums. That's what we do. But the problem in our setup, most of the times, that real time X-ray and going through the contrast, it is almost like being in a cath lab. So that is very difficult to get. That's why we have to rely on ultrasound, but it is very observer dependent, and the gases can really cause problem. So you have to be really particular and thinking about this condition. Then only you can say, look at the position of SMA and SMV. I think maybe if you can tell Dr. Vipul, because I don't think it is so commonly discussed. So in that even that ultrasound, if you can explain what you mean by volvulus, why you should consider volvulus there, and that SMA, SMV, because it is not, for others it may not be very clear.
Yes. Any more questions?
Somebody else.
Om Prakash, any comments?
I think he is out of the range.
He's out of range. He's on Vashi Bridge now. they were in Wadia for the Pulse course, I suppose, today.
Yes.
Yeah. Shantala, any comments?
No, sir. I'll tell you if I have.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Om Prakash, you want to
Please,
conclude?
yeah.
Can you show me that ultrasound again? And as sir said, can you just walk me through that, please?
SMV is a supramesenteric vein, and the artery which is moving around that, that's because of that malrotated segment. So this is kind of a relation, whirlpools, and they call it.
Yes, so Dr.
So
Shantala,
the normal,
the artery and vein, they should be side by side,
Okay.
and they should maintain that side by side relation. But when this the celiac trunk or the superior mesenteric artery forms the axis around which the intestine twists, so the twisting of the artery kind of gives that whirlpool appearance in the Doppler. So it is not just the abdominal ultrasound. The Doppler should be done. Then only you can put it. So this is one of the sign and classical whirlpool sign because of the twisting of the gut. Usually there shouldn't be any twist normal.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so just to conclude, what are the causes of per-rectal bleeding in a neonate? So in a well baby, it's if in the early course it's a swallowed maternal blood. At a later period, allergic causes like cow milk protein allergy, local causes as we discussed, anal fissure or rectal polyps. And in an unwell baby, NEC is most common, infections, bleeding disorders, either inherited or acquired causes, vascular malformations, any liver disease, any congenital gut anomalies like Hirschsprung's with enterocolitis, Meckel's diverticulum, but usually it's a late presentation after 1 month, say, intersusception, volvulus, or some drugs like endomethacin or steroids. And we can easily, means on investigations, we can easily make out probably the factor deficiencies.
Sir, I would like to say that your place is always full of spectacular clinical work.
we get very nice people to work with. So we have to do something. Chintan is I imagine, I remember those days. At least I remember a few cases which we saw during your time, Chintan.
Nice.
So if it is all, then Dr. Suresh, you can conclude the meeting. And
Yeah,
we'll meet
thank you,
again in the
Dr.
fourth.
Very interesting case, and I still like the case when you summarize the cause of the bleeding and you haven't put the intersusception or volvulus at right at the first 3, 4, 5, because only because of this is such an interesting case. And next time one shouldn't just keep on looking, and while the child is having torrential bleed, rather than sending PT, they would just run for ultrasound. That's not the message you want to give.
Yes.
Completely
Yes,
agree.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
excellent cases, really nice managed and discussed. And yes, we'd like to have similar kind of discussions henceforth. Thank you, Moite sir, Dr. Vipul, and Dr. Rahul for making it interesting. So, if there are no further comments, we can just say bye till next session.
Yeah.
Anything
We'll
you
meet
want to
last
say? Dr.
Saturday of the next month.
Yes.